If you would like to spend some of that time celebrating time, Hannah loves the word time. If you would like to spend time celebrating and appreciating Middle Eastern culture and music and food and art and activities for all ages, that will be there. And we're hoping that the event fosters community, understanding, and ultimately peace. So I wanted to.
It's in the bulletin.
It's in the 10 o'clock bulletin.
Oh, it didn't get in the next.
That's okay, but and by next week I hope to by the right time on Tuesday I hope to submit another announcement with basically the same words but also a picture for the bulletin for next week.
The date again is June.
The date again is June 21st.
June 21st. Okay.
June 21st from 4 to 10 Franklin Street between Washington and Scott.
Good. And then all of that information will be in the bulletin, so nobody could commit that tonight.
Right. It will be in the 10 o'clock bulletin, and it will be in the bulletin again next week. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody here on the table. Joyce Fletcher just asked me to sit in this chair and make sure Zoom is working and kick things off, and I'm happy to do that. Diane, I think you may win the award for being our furthest person from this room on the call, because you're the only one on Zoom, everybody else is here. So what we're doing this summer for Father George is to read the gospel and then just talk about its impact on us, what it evokes, what your responses are, and what you learn from it ultimately, of course. So having said that, I'm wondering if there would be somebody who would be willing to read the gospel that's on page 8 of the bulletin.
Are you on page, you're, we
10:30.
got 10:30. On the 8:30, it's on page 6.
Yeah.
10:30.
Yeah, you got that.
Different page.
31. Okay, so Elby's gonna read it and then we can go from there.
Philip said to Jesus, Lord, show us the Father, and we will be satisfied. Jesus said to him, have I been with you all this time, Philip, and you still do not know me? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own, but the Father who dwells in me does his work. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. But if you do not, then believe me because of the works themselves. Very truly I tell you, the one who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and in fact will do greater works than these, because I am going to the Father. I will do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If in my name you ask me for anything, I will do it. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to be with you forever. This is the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him, because he abides with you, and he will be in you. I have said these things to you while I am still with you. But the advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you everything and remind you of all that I have said to you. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world does give. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid.
Thank you, Elby. Well, I'm curious how people respond to that, if there are phrases or words or contexts that you reference when you read this. I think many of us who've been in a church have probably heard this since we were little kids. And so now all these years and decades, and I dare say a century later, I can look at things and still see and ponder things that I have not before with this. So with that, I'd like to open it up and see what you thought of it this morning.
I think I have kind of, I guess, a different perspective on the Holy Spirit than some, but I struggle with the Trinity as a concept. I think most people do, but also like understanding what is the Holy Spirit, like, and what is yourself. Like my church was always like, listen to the Holy Spirit, it'll tell you what you need to know. And I'm like, yeah, my brain also tells me really awful things all the time. I don't know what's what. So I'm like, how do I differentiate what's the Holy Spirit? What's my mental health? What's the world? Like, how do you even, I don't know. People would be like, oh, the Holy Spirit told me this. I'm like, I don't know what it told me. I don't know. I always felt a little behind in that area.
Could I just say one thing? If it truly is the Holy Spirit, he'll say it more than once. It just keeps coming back.
Another thing to add to that, though, because you need to, discernment happens in community. So when the Holy Spirit speaks, that like on the day of Pentecost, it speaks to everyone. It's poured upon all flesh. So if you have some kind of like, some people have done these where God is telling me to go and murder that person, right? I'm gonna talk to somebody else and test that in the, I think especially in the church community. Like, does that sound like that's the truth? Is that the Spirit really speaking to me? And so I feel like the Spirit's power is revealed in community, usually not like an individual, like, I'm telling you to do this, Hannah. That's sometimes something else speaking.
Thank you, George, that's very valid.
But I think it can be repeated.
Yeah.
Right? Even sometimes like, okay, Hannah, you're really called to teach, for example. Maybe you'll hear that again. You know.
And again, and again.
Yeah, right.
Coming up.
And maybe you want to test that, like that really talk to other people about that. Am I a teacher? Is that what I'm, and then you can get affirmation.
The good thing about the Trinity, even though, I don't think we can capture it in our minds or anything, but the Spirit is reflecting the Son and the Father. So that's why all these texts that we have of Jesus, knowing them and living with them a lot also helps you get those guardrails of discernment. To just know right off some of the stuff. But I love that. I think there's the Joel passage too in here where it's not just one prophet anymore. Oh, no, I guess you don't have that one. But it's poured out over all flesh and your young.
Which bulletin do you?
Oh yeah, this is it. Yeah, it's the epistle. That the slaves will be prophesying, the sons and daughters are going to be prophesying, old men, young men.
The slaves too.
Yeah, so it's a prophetic community now, not just one prophet. It's just the way God likes to do things now in this age. And so that's what you're saying, George, is the community is such a resource of discernment. Yeah.
Thinking of community, the first part where Philip asks the question and Jesus answers him, we don't know if all the disciples are there with him or not. I assume so. But he's saying, hey, just show me something and I'll be happy. In other words, give me some proof. I'm here.
I'm good.
Even though he's been following around and learning from him. And I think what I see in this, I'm really interested if anybody else sees it differently. He starts out pretty basic. Hey, if you've seen me, you've seen God. You've seen the work of the Holy Spirit. But then when he goes on to say, do you now believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words I say to you do not speak on my own, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. It sounds to me like that's kind of going to a plane that most of the disciples are not able to recognize. So it seems like there's a nugget here that hooks people and brings them in. I'm answering the question. But then there's a question for all eternity that follows it. Do you understand? And as everybody said, or if we've said, just understanding the Holy Spirit is a leap for a lot.
Reminds me of like when I was a child and you'd like hear these stories. You're like, why don't they just like figure it out? Like I'd be reading about like the disciples and I'd be like, you're making the same mistake over and over.
Yeah.
And like as an adult, I could be like, yeah, that tracks. But it was hard to like comprehend. I was like, he's literally telling you, just listen. And so it's kind of hard to like, it's easier to see yourself in them, I guess, child, but like, it is hard. Like, I can see it, what the disciples were doing, like, that's tough, but.
Something stands out for me in this passage, and that is if you're on page 6 of the 8:30 bulletin, at the very bottom, it says, "If in my name you ask me for anything, I will do it." So this is often taken out of context, right? And I find it troubling. It's beautiful and empowering, but it's also scary and misused. So I just thought that would be, I don't know if anybody else feels that way about it, but this is an example of taking something out of context that is the danger.
Well, how do you interpret it, George? I mean, what is Jesus saying?
Well, if we take that out of context, I'm like, oh, Lord, I want a Mercedes.
Right.
And you know what, I've really prayed and I really mean it, and I love you, Jesus, so why is this not happening, right? So that's the problem, and I know that's ridiculous, but I do feel like it gets used that way. In this context, it is about the discipleship of servanthood, and so the things that people need to ask for are courage and perseverance and mercy, and these are the things that will not fail. Anyway, Jamie, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it maybe ties back to the sense of keeping it in context. Very truly, I tell you, the one who believes in me also will do the works that I do, and in fact will do greater works than these, because I'm going to the Father. I will do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Father may be glorified. If in my name you ask me for anything, I will do it. Any of the things that I would do, that you ask me to empower you to do, I would do. Now, Jesus doesn't go to God and say, give me a Mercedes-Benz. I don't remember that in the Bible anyway. I do remember that one time, if you could take this cup away from me, that would be great, but if you don't, I'm going to go through with this. So if we're putting ourselves out and trying to do what Jesus would do, knowing that we are faulty and frail and can't handle it, he's saying, ask me, I'll help you. You'll do this, but I'm not going to help you do something that's not in the ministry, not in the message. That's how I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's helpful, and then, you put it actually in the words that come before are helpful, and the wider context, I mean, I do think we can ask Jesus, I mean, we can go to Jesus with anything we want, but I wouldn't use that as
Yeah, like in the church I grew up in, it was very much that idea of like, as long as you believe when you ask for it, it'll happen. Maybe not right away, but it'll happen. And it became this very transactional thing. And then I'd get frustrated because like, am I not believing well enough? Because I would ask for things and they would never come. And I was like, oh, clearly I'm just not doing something right. Because I'm not getting it. And a little bit of that religious OCD in there that I have, but is kind of this idea that like it's not transactional. Like if I'm asking for something and God's not giving it to me, there's a reason for it, or it's going to come up in a different way, in some way. So it's hard to keep your faith in tough times when you look at it as transactional. When you're going through a hard time and your faith rests on, I can ask God to fix this for me, and then it doesn't, things go sideways very quickly, at least in my experience.
I have a funny story about several decades ago. I was overbooked for a day, and I was a young mom, and I'm praying all day, oh, please, I don't want to have to go to this last meeting, please, please, please. Well, sure enough, one of my children developed strep throat that same day. So you have to be careful what you ask for. I did not go to that meeting.
But yeah, it's really interesting because that one way of thinking about it is it's foolproof, because if you're not getting it, it's because you're not believing enough. So if you don't get it, it's because you're not believing enough, Hannah. And then so you can't win, right? And so it'll stand as a correct idea for that group.
That's what's really interesting. I won't get too much into this because it's not the topic, but churches, a lot of evangelical churches are like built well for people with OCD, in the sense that they can hook people with OCD in really well. because a lot of that doctrine feeds into the concepts of OCD, if you know much about it. And so for me, like, I developed religious OCD. Like, I was like feeding into this, and it was feeding into my mental health. And I was like, I could walk away from the church just to get myself under control at this point. And so it's hard because you can like kind of, certain doctrines can play into things in an unhelpful point. But
I think it's just so hard to imagine that Jesus is saying all this stuff that you put together, Jimmy, and because he wants us, through this power of the Spirit, to be continuing his ministry now. And it's a partnership. It's not transactional. And that is so messy. So probably why it's harder for people to enter into it, harder for, churches to be big box with that. But that's what sometimes I worry about myself and about the church today, is that we don't realize the power of the Spirit today that's active and living and God at work. And it wasn't a long time ago, and it's not just a history. And so the verse that really gets me, and I've been taught about this verse once, and when I read it this week again, I never looked up. I kind of know who taught it, but I can't find it now. But whatever, you're going to do greater works than me. And I'm like, okay, I'll go with this partnership. I'll be messy. I'll make a lot of mistakes, and you stick with me. I'll ask for the Mercedes, or the kid who asked for the bike, in prayer, and then you'll help me get over to what I am praying, called to pray about. But this greater works than I did is I do. It is in there, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, here it is.
You will do, it says,
Very
in
truly.
fact, we'll do greater works than these. It says, I tell you, the one who believes in me will also do the works I do, and in fact will do greater work.
wild for me, like, just to think, like, you read the stories in the Bible and you're like, there's nothing like more crazy and insane and amazing than those stories. So it's like hard to see, at least for myself, like see yourself as someone capable of doing greater works.
Yeah, right.
High pressure, right?
Like, I go to bed and I get up and I, feed my brother and I do these things. I don't really see it as me doing great things in God's name, but
Yeah, and if I ever look that up, I will come back and just bring that out of the blue to tell you, but just think of the contrast between that greater works and you didn't believe in them. Just see the difference there in who God is, just so much more expansive view of who we are. And
Reminded of, George, of your point about in community doing greater works than these. And the challenge then, as Jesus says, as I'm leaving you, is for us to, and in this current time, we need to do greater works as a Christian community. I mean, that's a gauntlet has been imaginarily being laid in front of, at least from my side. What is our role as a Christian community in these times? To do greater works,
I also think we maybe get tied up in what we think greater means. That it has to be, so it has
thank
a
you.
bigger impact or splashy.
Yeah,
or
good call, good call.
But if I find you on the side of the road and you've just had a bad car accident and you're bleeding out, and I'm there and I put pressure on you and I say, God, please keep her alive.
Yeah.
And you come back a week later and say, thank you for praying for me, I'm still alive. You might feel like that was a more direct and a greater intervention than, no offense, Jesus did it 2,000 years ago, because we never actually talked to him.
Yeah.
And it's not greater, but it's greater.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think even like in the day-to-day, the things that we don't recognize. So like even as a teacher, like I do things day-to-day that like I don't see as anything special. I'm like, I'm surviving, I'm keeping these kids alive, and I don't see it as a grand thing. But other people often are like, oh wow, you do really great things for these kids, and I'm like, perspective. Like I would see something my mom's doing and be like, you are doing so many great things in God's name, and she's like, I'm just being a mom. And I'm like, no, it's perspective that I have that.
Yeah.
So, but think about, so just, you know, an example would be, okay, the St. Mark's community, right, has been started in 1897, and has existed since then. And, I mean, what kinds of, and works, I mean, how is this community, what has it been to itself and to the world? And if you look at all those things throughout all those years and all the different ways, you can point to countless examples of small things but large things. I mean, that's the greater works. I mean, like Jesus was, I mean, he was in a specific place and he did these examples, but now this community has been empowered to go from generation to generation to generation.
And around the world.
Around the world. And this is just this one community here. So, and you think about, multiply that times 1 million, and that is, I mean, and that doesn't say that there hasn't been great harm done, right? So I'm not pushing that under the rug, because the church has done incredible damage and harm. But at the same time, there have been great things. And I think there are greater things to happen.
I think sometimes the greatest things are the ones that are going on even now, day by day, week by week, and people's lives are being changed because of it. And I'm thinking specifically of the AA meetings that we do. I mean, every day, it used to be every day you could come here and there was a meeting. And this is something that most of us.
5 days a week right now.
But
But
we have,
they're not the same either. They're kind of different.
right, they're different times, different weeks, but most of us know nothing about that.
Jamie, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have any comments before you head out?
I'm going to do my great donation, but they needed a double donor at 10 o'clock, so I took.
Oh, my.
Oh, okay, so that's a great work.
Not ditching you guys.
Think about that, you know,
Yeah,
you're
good
going to
example.
be affecting lives that you don't know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Have a
thank-
good week, Jimmy.
Thank you, all of you too, and hopefully I'll see some of you on Saturday.
You know, and why are, yeah, and just the whole idea that it's more of a transactional feeling to me that we need to evaluate what we're doing and the impact we're doing. I mean, I know you wanna, you know, keep it between the ditches, evaluate it that much, but I sometimes think the only time that I evaluate my ministry, especially in the past, was when I was really depressed about it. And then it's usually a real negative filter that's over it, you know, like this is not you know, so maybe it's just one line in this text. We can just relax.
Well, in this conversation is reminding me of my father, who was, he died at 92. And for years, several years before that, he would, his big complaint was he's not doing anything. He's not contributing. He's not having any input. And yet we would hear at times when we'd call, we'd hear him in the background playing the piano. Say, oh, Mom, what's going on? Oh, your father's giving a lesson to so-and-so. Music thing.
Yeah.
He wouldn't acknowledge, or he couldn't notice anything was going on. Now, at the end, it was pretty minimal. Because he wasn't able to do a lot. And it was sad, and he was sad, and everyone was sad, because it was obvious that it was, his life was winding down. But what stuck with me is how much I feel like that, like, how I can minimize all of the things that happen. Opie and I have been cleaning, she's been cleaning stuff, and then sometimes
Sorting files.
sorting files and going through old.
This is not soap and water you're
No.
talking about.
We're finding
Funny,
paper.
that's the deal.
We're finding paper. We just found another box yesterday. So we're going through this, and it included a bunch of stuff that I had looked at.
Yeah.
Since, you know, it probably was put in that box in 1990. So it's very long ago. And so I'm going through trying to decide what to say, what to want. And it's taking me back, and I started remembering all these people because they're people that I'm doing things with in the community. Most of them are dead, and all of them are not remembered, in terms of what we were doing at the time. And I think that is, me. That's exactly me. So I woke up this morning, of course, reliving all of that stuff again. Some of that is just sadness that, you know, it's history and it's gone and not remembered. It's not important to be remembered, but it is what it is. I think we're all in that, right? We minimize what we do, not just in the moment, but even our memory of it in time, like my father.
I know I've reminded myself many times that we don't get to measure what's the greatest thing, you know, you accomplished in your life, or you know, the greater works, whatever it was. I mean, David's not saying, one of the things he's looking through is a lot of stuff about Illinois, Association of Marriage and Family Therapy, because he helped get it licensed in the state. I'll just say that, okay? So a lot of it was the work he was doing and going to Springfield and all this. Well, and that sounds impressive, and I was very glad he was doing it. At that same time, I was working on a library board in West Chicago, and we were trying to get a new building. And so I worked through 3 referenda, you know, and that felt important. But in God's view, the greatest thing that I ever do, or that he ever did, might have been to stop and chat with a checkout clerk at Jewel. I mean, you don't get to do the measuring, and I try very hard not to. Because I think it's the day-to-day interactions and being faithful in those small things. I'm okay with that.
That's so common for people not to be effective with what they do. Like, I always try to remember this because I think back to, like, I have a teacher who I had in middle school who single-handedly saved my life. Like, got me into therapy, like, saved my life. She probably thought nothing of it. Like, I doubt she understands what she did, but I know, and I appreciate it. So I feel like I try to remind myself of that. You're having an impact even if you're not seeing it. And that's hard because we as humans want to see proof that we're making a difference and proof that what we're doing matters. But I think it's having faith that what we are doing does matter even if we can't see it.
When I was in high school, we had a practice of dedicating our annual to a teacher or somebody on the staff all the time. And I was in a position where we picked one of my favorite teachers and I got to present it to her. But the quote that I found that we put in the yearbook was, a teacher affects eternity. She can never tell where her influence stops. And I'm feeling like there's some parallels here with this kind of stuff. What may be a small, seemingly insignificant interaction, you know, could be those things that who knows what else is happening by it. Okay, so now I've got a tough question for you. 2-parter. 1, does anybody know, or would anyone be comfortable saying something that they're convinced was the Holy Spirit working in their life? And that could be highly personal. I'm not expecting everybody to give that, but I'm curious about that, given what we've been talking about here and where we may not know for years, if ever, in our lifetimes.
Yeah, I can think of a time.
Think of many.
Yeah.
I was at the Jewel on a Sunday morning. I don't know why. We must have been having company later in the day, and I had something last minute. It was like 6:30 on a Sunday morning. And this was right after the blow up at Willow Creek Church around Bill Cycles. And I saw Lynn, his wife, in the store. We had been friends years ago, but I hadn't seen her for quite a while. We used to go to Willow Creek. And I felt this nudge, go talk to her. And at first I was like, we haven't been around. I don't want her to have to make nice with somebody she hasn't seen, you know what. And I just kept feeling that. And so I said to God, myself, I don't know. I said, if I see her again, I'll talk to her. And I realized in that moment that I had the groceries I needed, and I went to go up to pay. I pulled my cart into the line, checkout line, and saw her right in front of me. I had not seen who was in there. And so we chatted for a while. I asked her how she was doing, if she was sleeping, and how things were going. Just 3, 4, 5 minute conversation. I got 4 phone calls from friends of hers saying, Lynn told me what a wonderful blessing it was to talk with you. I'm like, I don't even remember it was like, okay. I gave her something. I didn't know, you know, it was like, cool, you know.
Yeah, it reminds me of, it's kind of piggybacking off the story of the teacher who saved my life, was like, came to me, I was like, was this just a fictional story that you wrote? Or is there something deeper going on? And I could have easily played it off, and like I always did, and been like, oh, I just wrote a fictional story and just gone on with my life. But I felt like I actually hesitated for once, and like had this just like moment, like, something doesn't feel right about lying about this. And like, I'm feeling like I need to tell somebody, but I never had that before my entire life. And I like to believe it's the Holy Spirit kind of like having that moment of like, you're literally at a crossroads right now. You need to pick which way you're going, and let's not pick the other option. And so I finally was like, maybe it wasn't all fiction. And like, I couldn't admit it all, but like, just that was enough for them to be like, okay, let's get some help, it'll be fine. And so I regretted it for so long, because I was like, when did you tell the truth? Now I have to do all this stuff and be honest about my feelings. But looking back, I found the story years later, and I was like, I get it. And also I'm glad that I had that moment of just something stopped me, which it had never stopped me before. I had lied about my mental health my whole childhood. Something in that specific moment just was like, I need to pick a different path. So.
I remember, because I'm an educator as well, and I taught photography classes, and then later became a reference librarian. And I had a little older than typical college age lady in my class, photography class, and there were just things that I liked to do, and because it was a duty to teach, you know, vocabulary and other aspects of the art as well as just doing the picture taking. And later, when I was in the library, I bumped into her, and she said, you know, the one thing you did was you got me out. And that was a level of, I think the wrong word is praise, but it's just, you forget that maybe you do that. Also I had a fellow who became a sheriff's evidence technician, and he took my class, and he did photographic work for Cook County Sheriff's Office, and he was the technician that gathered all the Casey evidence photographs. She offered me the opportunity to see, and I passed on it. And but since then, and I don't know if he's still in the area or not. Always when he's in the presence of somebody else, because he's also a gymnastics coach and other things. He always was good. You could tell this guy taught me all, and